Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and it's time for key questions of Chapter 17. How and why, number one, did John Tyler ruin the Whigs' plans? Well, John Tyler was actually, in his heart, a Southern Democrat, and so when he was chosen to be vice president for the Whigs, the only reason he was a Whig party member was because he hated Andrew Jackson. So he's chosen to help them win the election to wrap up the Southern vote. And so John Tyler's chosen as vice president. After William Henry Harrison passes away, John Tyler becomes president. And because he was a Democrat at heart and in his beliefs, when the Whigs attempt to pass a new fiscal bank and then a fiscal corporation, John Tyler blocks it. So John Tyler, being a at his heart Democrat who was only in the Whig Party because he hated Jackson, ruins their plans to reinstate the economic plan that was in existence before Andrew Jackson, specifically the bank. Number two, what caused conflict with Britain during the 1830s and 1840s? Primarily, the conflicts are caused by a border dispute, a series of border disputes, really. First, you have the Aroostook War in the Northeast in Maine, the Lumberjack War, as some even call it. That is settled, and we create a permanent border there. Then further out west, you have the Oregon Territory, where the British claim that it should go all the way down, the border should go all the way down the Columbia River, while the Americans want the northern border to be at the 5440 line. So primarily the conflicts were caused over the borders between our two countries. Number three, what is manifest destiny? Manifest destiny is the belief that God has ordained us or destined us to spread west and to control all of the land from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean. So this means that we need to take over more territory to our west that other people or groups are in control of. So what stands in our way of completing manifest destiny during this time period? First, you have the British. As we discussed, we had several border disputes. And while that doesn't necessarily result in a lot of land gained one way or the other, although in the Oregon Territory we do end up with a lot of land, it's really just helping solidify control of the areas around us. Next, you also have the Mexican government. The Mexican government controlled California, New Mexico, Arizona, all those regions. They even disputed our control of the good portion of the Texas territory. And so Mexico also stood in our way. And third, finally, what the third and final group that stands in our way are the Native Americans. This issue will be wrapped up after the Civil War as we fight several small wars with the Indian tribes and round them up and place them on reservations. So what territories were desired? As I mentioned, Oregon primarily, the California territory, and then even the western portion of Texas. In addition, there was a lot of land controlled by the Mexican government, which after the war begins, we decided to make a push for. Number four, name the four parts to Polk's plan. I called it the COIL plan. You have California, you have Oregon, you have the independent treasury, and lower tariffs. So California and Oregon fit perfectly with the idea of manifest destiny, that we need to control those lands and take them from those who would stand in our way. The independent treasury, Polk was stubborn and he refused to allow them to create another national bank in Congress. So he blocked the federal government bank and instead focused on our money being independent of the federal government. And then finally, you have lower tariffs. Because he represented farmers in the South, the typical Democratic attitude towards tariffs, he's able to push for tariff rates to be lower during his presidency. So how many did he accomplish? He accomplished all four parts of his plan. Number five, what caused a war to start between the United States and Mexico? Well, first of all, you have the lasting bitterness between America and Mexico over the Texan territory. But the primary cause is manifest destiny. We believed we were destined to hold all those land to our west and much of the land that Mexico themselves controlled. So when it comes down to it, after they refused to sell California to us, Polk felt as though he had no choice but to force a conflict in order to take that land from Mexico. And so Polk moves men across the Nueces River, which was the claimed border by Mexico of Texas. And when those men cross that border or cross that river and sit there for 5 months in 1846, from January to May, Mexico finally feels compelled to attack, and that sparks a war between the two nations. So skipping the details of the war because they are not really relevant to the AP test, and we went over them briefly in class. Other than Zachary Taylor being a general who later becomes president, and Winfield Scott being a general who later runs for president, what we want to focus on are the effects the Mexican-American War had on the United States. So to answer number 6, the first effect would be that we gain nearly a third of our territory. We gain California, we gain New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, Nevada. We gain a lot of territory in this war. Some textbooks estimate that it is equivalent to the Louisiana Territory purchase. Beyond that, the other effect the Mexican-American War has on the United States that is significant is that it begins the debate over slavery once again. With all this new territory, are we going to keep it as free territory or is it going to be slave territory? It's made even more difficult because the Missouri Compromise land of 3630 cuts directly through most of this land, including what would later become the state of California, which would have been divided in half. David Wilmot, a congressman, he also pushes that none of this land should be able to become slave territory. And that begins a debate in Congress, which will be temporarily resolved in 1850, which we'll cover in a later chapter. All this to say, the Mexican-American War had one great effect for us, which was we gained a lot of land, and one very negative effect, which is it reignites the debate over slavery, which will eventually lead into the Civil War. That is pretty much it for chapter 17. A lot of details we left out, but again, we're focusing on the big picture. And any chapter with a war means that we're going to focus on the bigger picture rather than the individual details of the battles and the leaders. So hopefully you got a lot out of this video. Hopefully this answered all your questions. And if you have any, once again, just ask me in class. See you.